You're listening to an Airwave Media Podcast.
Hello, friends, clever listeners. For the next few weeks, we're taking you on a little trip down memory lane. Clever launched in 2016, and since then, we've met so many talented folks and shared their fascinating personal stories that we thought we'd revisit a few of them. So we handpicked a selection of some of our favorites that are definitely worth a second listen. And if you missed them the first time, you are in for a real treat. We'll be back in September with some exciting and shiny new episodes for you. In the meantime, I hope you'll take us with you in your ears and in your hearts on all your summer adventures. I want to be with you on your bike rides, on your road trip, and lounging with you in a hammock. Okay, so we love and appreciate you a ton, and please do stay in touch on social. See you soon.
Yeah, my finishing, they're the backbone of the studio. So my first assistants were, I worked out of my house first, and I just had a little corner store attached to it. And my neighbors across the street, they would just come over and sit on the bench and watch me work. And I was like, all right, this is okay. For a while, and then I was annoyed. I'm like, well, help me. I'll pay you to help me. You're just sitting there, sipping tea, watching me work.
Hi everyone, I'm Jamie.
I'm Amy, and this is Clever. Today we're talking to artist and designer Chris Schanck, who's made a name for himself with his alufoil series of furniture objects, in which items of industrial refuse are sculpted, covered in aluminum foil, and finished with resin. It's a visual language that could be described as decrepit luxury or romantic decay, deploying high-caliber craftsmanship and industrial materials to stunning and provocative effect.
Born in Pittsburgh, he got his BFA in sculpture at SVA and his master's in design from Cranbrook Academy of Art. After graduating, he stayed in Michigan and established his Detroit studio in 2011. He's exhibited at galleries and museums internationally and has just concluded his first solo show at Friedman Benda in New York. Let's talk to Chris.
My name is Chris Schanck. I live in Detroit, Michigan, and a furniture designer, artist, and I don't really stop to ask why. It's just what I've always done.
Okay, well, we're going to tease that apart in this conversation then. We're going to figure out why you gravitated towards furniture design and hybrid furniture design that's also art. That's fascinating to me personally. I am also a Michigander, a native Michigander.
Really?
Yeah, I live in Los Angeles now, but I was born and raised in Ypsilanti, so I have a deep,
awesome,
bone marrow deep affection for Detroit.
I have 3 great assistants who came out of Ypsi.
Man,
yeah. It's
good people from there.
It's so good. They went to Eastern, super talented, and they're Ypsi strong. They really love Ypsi over Detroit. It's they're very territorial. So yeah. I kind of get it.
We like to start from the very beginning. And I understand you were born in Pittsburgh. So
I was.
Can you tell us a story from your childhood that describes your youth and your family and what your experience of Pittsburgh was like?
Yeah, I was born there, but I was raised in Texas. So my time and my memories, they were brief but impactful. So I was born there, and we moved when I was 5, going on 6. But it was, let's see, at that time, my father was a house painter. My mom was a stay-at-home mom. I had my brother Joseph and my sister Jalea. We'd already sort of moved around a few times before we left. And Pittsburgh was it was a bit weird because there were some of my earliest memories of leaving there. We left sort of in a hurry, overnight. We sort of packed the car and drove to Texas with no real explanation why. Well, it was a bit dodgy in the sense that my mother would walk me to kindergarten, and we'd be followed by a police car. And it was
whoa, this got really intriguing. You're gonna have to tell us this whole story.
It was I think my parents were really young and got in some kind of sketchy stuff. And we had to without going into super details, like we had to leave. And it was like a weird sort of transition because all of our family was from there, like all of my grandparents, aunts and uncles, but we just sort of packed up and left, like in the middle of the night. But like that didn't seem sort of weird as a kid. It seemed like an adventure. And like my other good memories there, like my mother was like really super creative, and like my first real sort of, I don't know, like art teacher, at home. And she had all these friends. We'd go to their houses and make like popsicle and yarn art and, just sort of arts and crafts. And she was like always very industrious and like good with whatever materials were around. So I just remember just like hanging out with her and her friends, like making stuff. And I don't know. And then we took off to Texas.
So taking off to Texas, you were also kind of, I guess, I don't want to call it ripped, but a little bit ripped away from also your extended family and everything you had known thus far in your life. You said it felt like an adventure, but did it also feel a little precarious or scary?
It totally did. It sucked in that I lost like that connection to, people I'd already grown to love, and care about, especially my grandparents and my uncle, who also, I should say, like before I left there, was extremely influential because he was a graphic designer. So he was like the first professional artist I was around. And my parents encouraged like me being creative and stuff, but he took it to another level of like when I was 5, bought me a drafting table and pencils and markers. And like before I could even like sit at the table, you know what I mean? He was like, these are the tools of the trade. And this is what you need. He was like, he saw that I could draw. At 5, I had an ability, that he could recognize anyway. And a passion. I expressed my interest, and so he gave me all this stuff, and he would give me like lessons. Like he worked out of his home, and he would draw there. And he was like my first drawing lesson with him is like he drew a soup can, and just watching someone draw an ellipse. I didn't know what an ellipse was, but seeing the skill and like the confidence of like someone drawing something from life was like totally magical. And it's like that was like definitely what I was going to do in one way or another. And he continued to, even from afar, like he made a real effort to visit us in Texas, and we didn't get back to Pittsburgh much. It could be 5 years between visits, but he would come down and always, just sort of, he just always got it, and we'd always work together whenever we had an opportunity. And he mentored me, from near and afar to make sure that I pursued it and, went to college and stuff like that. So he was a real hero and mentor.
Yeah, can we call him out or his business or anything? You got a name for this uncle?
Well, he's Rocco Siamaco. is his name. You can call him Rock or Rocky, but don't call him Buddy, because I grew up calling him Buddy, and something happened and he decided Buddy wasn't cool anymore. Or I gotta get that story still. Now it's just Rocco. So
okay.
He's like semi-retired now. He's like having a little trouble with his health, but he was just independent. Rocky Siamaco, still working as an independent graphic designer in Pittsburgh. But it's also important that he came up like doing that in the 70s and 80s, and like he made the digital like transformation. But before that, he was a master in like watercolors and colored pencils. Just saw this like analog, masterful process of like rendering or the real world. That was just like beyond like, I don't know. It was what I had always aspired to do. I didn't do that exactly, but I had a great respect for like the craft early just by watching him.
Well, what a fantastic influence in your life. I'm happy to hear that story.
Me too. I'm super grateful.
So it sounds like you knew from a young age that you wanted to pursue the arts. But, high school's a weird time for kids and there's a lot of angst and there's a lot of self-discovery. Were you involved in a lot of arts programs in your high school?
I was incredibly lucky in high school because I grew up in the suburbs of Dallas, in this place called the Colony, which it is what it sounds like. It's in the middle of nowhere. And if I'd gone to my traditional Texas high school, Newman Smith, I would have probably never made it out of Texas. But I found out there was an arts magnet high school in downtown Dallas. My middle school art teacher told me about it. And she's like, you should look into this and you should apply to this school. So it's called Booker T. Washington. And it was the first integrated high school in Dallas. So I put together a portfolio, with her help, and went down into the city and applied and went through this, process. We had to do a live drawing thing and a live sculpting thing and interview. Anyway, I got in. It's like fame. It was like the fame of Dallas. It saved my life. If I hadn't gone to that high school and met the teachers and mentors there, I would have never, ever, I would have still been sitting in some apartment in Dallas dreaming about what could have been if I took my creativity seriously. It was the intensity, the professionalism, the expectations that they put on you was just a very sort of expedited process, they took you seriously and they wanted you to take yourself seriously. And it just...
How totally validating for an adolescent trying to find their creative path and figure out if it's viable or if it's even worth putting energy into.
Right. I mean, there's no, it was a dream come true. They were just, my drawing teacher, Miss Miller, we did life drawing every day, 5 days a week. And it was Miss Miller made you draw, and just work your ass off. And my painting teacher, Mr. Mosley, George Mosley, was a father figure. And he taught me about, before that, art was some vague, ancient, historical thing, that I couldn't really get my head around. And he was this is what contemporary art is, and taught me how to paint and took me to the museum and gave me a studio. I had my own painting studio in high school.
Oh my God, really?
That's so amazing. Cool.
It was beyond, if there was any doubt before then, I was completely hooked, for better or worse, at that point, that it was oh, this is a real thing. And having people around you that believed in you, and that you could, hey, you can do this for a career. When it's really hard, a working class family, tell them you want to be an artist, and they're like, that is there's no, how the fuck are you going to do that? That's not a real,
right.
That's not a real thing, Right. And having professionals tell you, and they were all practicing, that was part of, to work at the high school, you had to be a practicing artist on some level.
So then you could be look, mom and dad or society, these people have, they're artists and they have a job and they can do this for a living.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
So then you went on to study a lot of stuff at a couple of different places. So you studied sculpture at SVA and then photography and 3D design at Cranbrook. Is that right?
More or less. I studied sculpture at SVA. Then I did a brief stint. I went to get an MFA at Central St. Martin's in London, which I dropped out of. And then I ended up at Cranbrook. And it was just a 3D design education. But I had a great mentor in the photography department, Liz Cohen. I wasn't officially in her department, but she came and critiqued my work and became a client. She commissioned work and became a mentor. And my conversations with her were sort of super important to my time there.
So can you walk us through kind of what your college years were like?
SVA was a total trip. I was, fresh, young, 18-year-old kid out of Dallas. So New York was just super intimidating. I didn't know what was.
I went to New York when I was 18 too, and it was the best thing I ever could have done. And it was the scariest thing ever.
Same.
Yeah.
Same. I was I had a good education, a good foundation. And it was But I was just like, what? Like my teachers were like, go look at art. I'm just like, I don't know what I'm looking at. Like, I'm so out of my element. Like, what's wrong with me? You know, like I thought I was good, but clearly I'm not, you know, and it was such a vulnerable experience. This like, you know, just looking and trying to understand. And one day it sort of clicked when I saw an exhibition by Franz West. It was like the first sort of, let's call it conceptual work that I could connect to in some way. And then like, I didn't know a single person here when I came here, right? So I met a great recruiter from SVA at my high school who was like, you're going to come to New York, you know, and I just trusted and believed this guy. And he sort of, you know, held my hand through that process. And I told my parents, all right, I'm going to New York. And they're like, you know, we can't like help you. I'm like, no, I totally get it. It's not like that. I'm just letting you know. You go.
Right.
I'm going. And so I got there and literally knew no one. And that was like, but I also loved that.
Yeah.
And have ever since. Like I love sort of just being completely out of my element. So I embraced that part of it. A great group of like peers at the school who were like from New York or New Jersey, and were just like connected and take me around to the clubs. Like I had my first like solo show at the Limelight Club.
Yeah.
Do you remember that?
I do.
He was like, let's do a show like in the back room. And I like did these series of paintings and we did horse tranquilizers and just like partied. And it was just like, that was like.
Was that the 90s?
It was the 90s. It was like such a good scene. And it was like, but they introduced me to that, you know, like they showed me the ropes. And
those horse tranquilizers are fun though.
They totally are. I don't think I could handle it now, but it was super fun. And they like,
yeah,
it was a blast. Like I loved SVA, and you got to work with amazing sort of artists. You know, I worked with Chaim Steinbeck, who was like a hero of mine. You know, before I went there, and they were like, you know, curating you into student shows, but like. It was done by some of my favorite sort of artists. And so it was like a real confidence boost and it's amazing learning curve, you know, just trying to keep up and catch up with other kids who were just like way hipper to the scene, you know?
Oh my God. You're describing my experience too. Oh my God.
Right. And then immediately, like, upon graduating, like I got to show like an amazing, at the time it's gone, there's a Massimo Ariello gallery, which is in Chelsea. The guy came into my studio and picked my work, put it in a show. And what was so significant was like, it was the same gallery that Felix Gonzalez Torres first showed at when he was like just starting. Right. And I admired him like in college. Like I came to like admire like a few people. It was like Franz West, Gonzalez Torres, and like Matthew Barney, like that, like in the 90s, like that was my jam. And he started there, and this guy put me in the gallery, and I was just like, I fucking made it. Like, it's like I'm in the same gallery as Gonzalez Torres. You know, he quickly like dropped me because we got like into a huge argument. It was a short-lived sort of thing, but it was a taste of the professional world that was like intoxicating.
Is that argument worth talking about?
It was maybe like it got reviewed in the Times, and it was like, oh shit, you know, and it was so exciting. But he talked about the work. I did this installation piece that was kind of like based off of these homes I saw as a kid in Dallas. It was like these developments that got abandoned and and we would play in these like abandoned developments, and it was sort of recreating that environment. But it was but my recreation was very saccharine and sweet, you know, and he talked about it as like I made a giant birthday cake. And so I called him up and I was like, Massimo, I was like, please don't tell people I made a giant birthday cake. Like, it's so much more meaningful than that. And he was like, Chris, you are not the Nazi, like, art police. You cannot tell people what to think. Like, he just fucking, like, chewed me out about trying to tell him what he should or should not say about his work or how people should interpret it. And we both had a point. Like, I learned that, yeah, you can't, if it's not in the work inherently, like you can't tell people what to think or how to feel about what you make. You have to let them experience it.
This is an argument I have with my husband all the time. He always wants to ask the artist like why they made what they made. And he wants to know like the reason behind it and that story. And he's like, that's the true story of the art. Like, that's what it means. And I'm like, yeah, but if I look at it and I say, oh, I think it means this, is that not the true meaning of the art? And he says no. And I'm like, well, that's not fair because it's how I feel about it. And it's my relationship with it. And like, once you make art and put it out into the world, like, is it really only meaning what you meant it to, or you intended it to mean? Or does it take on all of these new meanings in a subjective way with each person that has an experience with it?
I hope it's the latter. I hope it takes on a new meaning.
So you're saying I'm right? I need to have that on record.
I'm siding with you.
Okay, cool.
I'm going to get my first hate mail from your husband.
Yes. Sorry.
But
Okay, so let's get to Cranbrook. Oh, I mean, unless you want to tell us about dropping out of Central St. Martin's.
I can briefly, because it led into Cranbrook. So I went there to get an MFA in fine arts, and I was there studying. And at that point, I was already sort of making conceptual work about like architecture and design, like small scale, like fantastical, like models of like science fiction architecture and stuff like that. And I was around all these amazing artists, but I realized that I was more interested in actually doing the design instead of just being an outside sort of critic or on the fringe of the conversation. Like it intrigued me like enough that I couldn't pursue it like purely as like just an artist. I didn't think like I wanted to really try on the skin of a designer and how they thought and how they approached the world. And so I was like, I don't need to get an MFA in fine arts specifically. So I just let me like reboot and go get a design degree and like see what this is all about.
Okay, that makes sense to me.
Yeah. So I went back to New York and put together like a pretty amateur design portfolio, like some silly stuff, some goofy stuff. I like maybe tried to make one or two earnest like things, but I was like a pretty experienced maker at that point. So even though like if conceptually the ideas weren't strong, there was a strong sense of craft. And with that combination, Cranbrook seemed to be the right fit. Or like they accepted that I had a fine arts background and interest in design. They were like, okay, cool, you can like explore it here. So I went there thinking that, well, trying to make not like sculptural, like artistic things at all, but I wanted to know what did it feel like to make like ubiquitous, like anonymous piece of design. Mm-hmm. Conceptually, that area like really interested me to sort of, and to get outside of your own head and to look out at the world and, and observe and try to make still an artifact that you can put out into the world and be used without people ever thinking about how to use it or who made it.
Right.
So I tried doing that and like wasn't super good at it. Like I had like I made some like interesting things, but I got to know people doing it. So I thought that in the process of doing that, it made sense to get to take on a single client or a single individual person and find like one specific need to try to design around. So that really got me interested in this idea of like not designing for many, but designing for one, which sort of led to designing for just an experience, and it didn't have to be for everyone or liked by everyone. It went from very sort of practical to completely experience-based and not having to have like any high function in any sort of like passive way that you would expect, a standard piece of furniture to have.
Everything that you're saying totally resonates with me. This is Amy, and I'm also a furniture designer. I have an MFA from RISD, but I was never ever able to really conquer the pure utilitarian, the pureness of design for the people. I was only ever interested in this really conceptual function, this function that invited the user in to have a long-term relationship with the piece, but the piece was really conceptual and personal. And so this sort of hybrid of furniture and sculpture. Artistically speaking, that's my jam. And so,
yeah, no, it's a great territory. There was I had experiences in New York before Cranbrook when I was just making a living working for art galleries, museums, model making shops. But I worked at MoMA for a while as an art handler for 3 years. MoMA proper and PS1. And MoMA was such a good, interesting job in that the first week working there, you're just chilling in the break room and the boss comes out and there's who wants to dust the collection, and all the normal staff is pretending to sleep. They're I don't want to fucking do that. And I'm yeah. I'll do it. And he's cool, here's a feather duster, go to the collection, dust it off. And I was okay. So to the permanent collection of the MoMA, there's not a single guard, patron, or other staff worker. It is complete VIP access to the permanent collection. So I'm going around dusting Brancusi's, touching them, not actually touching them. With no one there. And it was these icons that I, admired all my life. And there I was with them and interacting with them. And there was this moment, this power of holy shit, that breaking through that wall was that is an energy that I knew I had to keep exploring. And a lot of what I do now goes back to that experience, trying to create something that's so standalone sculpturally, but has this room to negotiate it and interact with it and figure out how you become a part of it.
Yeah. You pioneered a sort of trademark technique that you're famous for called alufoil while you were in school at Cranbrook. Did you have that feeling when you started working in that vein that this was a direction that was going to be really important for you?
Yes. When I made this really the very first maquettes, really small, sloppy 3D sketches, I got instant feedback from the object that was really exciting. It was a very immediate sort of process initially, but the results were super alien to me. So much that it didn't feel like I made it, and that's what I'm always searching for. I'm chasing that dragon, right? Of it happened, but I don't know how it happened. I don't have to see myself in it. 'Cause, if it becomes alien enough, it's worth exploring to figure out where it came from and what it is. I was super excited about it initially. I didn't know that it would lead to building a more of a career off of this thing or anything like that. But I knew that this was going to be something that was going to take some time to tease out and mature.
Yeah.
And it was a completely new technique. And that's it was just a long time of just learning how to understand this process and develop it. And it was learning a new, any technique, learning how to paint something. You're just learning the fundamentals, right? Until you can decide what are you going to do with it now. Are you going to paint a landscape or an abstract portrait? It seemed like it could be a whole world worth exploring.
Mm. Well, it seems to me too, kind of creating a new language. You can create some sounds and syllables, but then you've got to apply meaning to the words and then tense, and then you've got to string them together to tell the whole story. And in a new language, the test of success is how it connects and expresses to other people.
That is entirely correct. That is spot on.
Okay.
Yeah. It's I can do it. Now, what do I do with it?
Yeah.
What do I want to say with it? What voice do we give to this process? And, it's a material in process, and that's all it is until you have something to say with it.
Right. So that must have felt and you said chasing the dragon, the worst feeling in the world is sort of running around in circles, not knowing which direction you're going in. But when you find your dragon and you can just chase after it wholeheartedly, that feels really exciting.
No, it totally does. To feel like you're in the behind some creative energy. It's propelling you, and you're just trying to figure out what it is and keep up with it and manifest something out of like what's coming off of it is like, that's the high.
Was it in any way informed by your surroundings in Detroit? Because you made a decision to stay in Detroit and start your studio there. And I'm wondering, as a Michigan native and somebody who's really fond of Detroit, I know that there's a grittiness, there's a scrappiness, and there's kind of a beauty in the history and texture. And I'm wondering if that was informing your work.
It's a delicate thing to talk about. You have to remember, I'm not from there, right? So right. I'm not a native, but it's super inspiring, and that's, I think when I moved down into Detroit, I was extremely naive about sort of what I was doing and what I was seeing and trying to understand my context and community. And admittedly, so I was always sort of seduced by images of the apocalypse, right? Since in film and literature, things like I was always really interested in that. And then I was like, oh, here I am in the post-apocalypse scenario, and I loved the texture of it, but that's not enough, and
right.
That's incredibly an outsider perspective, and so it took time to understand what I was really in, and learning about the people around me, learning about my neighbors, and for the first time in my life, feeling like I was in a community, which was sort of bizarre and new to me. So it was a lot of things happening at once.
Sure.
So then I started to understand it wasn't the apocalypse; it was these people in communities, like not just surviving but thriving, on the fringes and edges of a city, that had figured out how to make it happen and create their own standards of living in their own communities, and that it just completely flipped my perspective, and that took a couple of years, to really sort of figure that out. It's like walking to a room with the lights out and you can't see anything, but if you just chill and adapt, things start emerging out of the darkness, and that's what it felt like. It's like, this isn't garbage, this isn't trash, this is very, very thoughtful, maximalist use of material and energy to create place and create community, and it was and still is the most inspiring thing I can be around.
It's really interesting.
Yeah, I've always felt very connected to, there's a DIY mentality. And by DIY, I don't mean the home improvement channel. I mean in the punk sense of the word.
Right on.
Of not necessarily having to conform to any sort of set of rules or permissions, but just figuring out what works and doing it in a way that benefits your own survival and your own community. That I feel permeates Detroit, and people like to disparage Detroit, but I feel there's so much optimism there.
No, you're entirely right. It's incredibly optimistic. My good friend and artist in Detroit, Wesley Taylor, who I greatly admire, is, taught me, I learned through his eyes, and he was Detroit's always been going through a renaissance, man. It's not just happening right now.
Yeah, it's always been that.
It's been contributing globally, its culture, for decades. This is not a new thing, man. He's you're coming in on something, he's be a part of it, but you're not inventing it, man.
Right.
I was
way to give you perspective. Yeah.
yeah. I was cool, man. Cool. I was all right. But you gotta find those people. You have to find who have been there and seen the ups and downs, and their families, have seen the ups and downs, and learn how to ride the wave and survive, and just they're, I don't know. It's always been a good city. It's just it's not just happened now.
Right. Well, your love for it feels very sincere, and that comes across.
It is. It's like I said, I never felt like, we moved, when I was growing up between Pittsburgh and in Texas, we moved about 22 times that I can remember before I left for college, so it was always bopping around, and I just had my immediate family, my brother, my sister, my mom, my dad, like that was it. And then New York, it's just like, how many different times do you live in here, and it wasn't until I got and moved into the city, into my house, and I was like, I'm putting down roots, and like, this is weird, this is like not, I like got antsy, like this is not my style. Like they're like, what's the next thing? What's the next thing? And then, and then like, maybe, I don't know, my, like internal clock was just give it a minute, just like see what this is about and see what you can do here. Because it presented the energy of the city, like, was just so rare and unique. Like, never felt anything like that. So
I want to talk about your work and your shows. Your first, I think your first solo show was with Friedman Benda Gallery. Is that correct?
It is.
So how do you feel like your work has evolved leading up to this show?
I think, you kind of nailed it earlier when you were saying it's sort of about learning, like learning vocabulary, right? So you just start off like little bits, and then you have to like string things together, and then you have to create content and meaning. I think this show was that where we not just me, but my entire studio staff, like matured in the process and became like involved in creating the narratives around the work. And what we were doing for years was like me running around just trying to teach people how to do it, and like what I was thinking and what I was trying to do. But by the time it came around to produce this show, I had, sculptors and assistants and people working who mastered their areas of the craft, and not just the making, but became involved in like conceptualizing like what we were trying to do. So we had conversations around like developing the work and what we were trying to say with it. So it went from like a very singular experience of like just me to like much more of like family style making, so we could just take the work like further, just get funkier with it, and just, really try to do like what we've been talking about doing, like in our like dreams, like 'cause we've been like up before the show doing cool work and like commissioned like shows here and there, but never a real platform, to like show off what we could do. So it's like, all right, let's totally geek out.
And I appreciate you saying we, because I do feel like a lot of times when artists have either techniques or a lot of production going on and they grow their studio, they still kind of, it's very singular, and people still just think of that one person, and because that's like the person who represents the work, right? But it sounds to me like you work in a very collaborative environment. Is that the kind of energy that's going on in your studio at all times?
It is. It's wildly collaborative, and but it's not my natural state. That's what was hard, because, I come like from individual studio practice, you have these like images in your head of like the artist toiling away, completely suffering in his room by himself. Right. By himself. And that's like, I was like, that's what I'm going to do, Then it starts like growing, like kind of accidentally, like with these people around you. And then that just keeps growing, and you work with them day in and day out. And it's like, it's not like assistants. It's like friends and family. And like, if my crew walked out on me now, like I'd be done. Like I was like, they're too good. Like they're too good. Like they're just so like ingrained in every part of it. Like I can't, like, I don't know, like I would survive, but I would feel like I lost like my partner. Like I'd start again, but like probably doing like origami, like in a hotel somewhere. But it's like, I'm super dependent, but like in the most healthiest way. Like I've been like in like really bad codependent like relationships most of my life, but this is definitely the healthiest one where I'm just like, I really love you guys. Like,
well, yeah, I mean, you guys spend all day together kind of birthing these things together. And so there has to be collaboration, but like also mutual respect and willingness to work with each other on a daily basis.
Well, I also read, and you can tell us about this, but I read that there's a Bangladeshi community outside of your studio and that several Bangladesh transplants work in your studio and have actually sort of mastered your technique and taken it further than you ever did. And I love that.
My finishing, they're the backbone of the studio. So my first assistants were, I worked out of my house first and I just had a little corner store attached to it. And my neighbors across the street, they would just come over and sit on the bench and watch me work. And I was like, all right, this is okay. For a while, and then I was annoyed. I'm like, well, help me. I'll pay you to help me. You're just sitting there, sipping tea, watching me work. And so my very first assistant was Nilufa, and she lived across the street. And then her daughters, they also started working there. So it was me and the three of them with the first crew.
Oh, I love it.
Learning how to foil and that I don't know, you get pretty close, and that also comes with a lot of pitfalls. But and that grew. At the town. The part of town we live in, Northeast Detroit, is called Banglatown, established by the Bangladeshi community there, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, and we're right on the edge of Hamtramck, which has the most mosque per capita in the U.S. So it's this really strong, vibrant, community, that's growing there. So it grew word of mouth, right? As I needed more assistance because work options for a new immigrant are sparse. We have people moving here who are experts in craft back in Bangladesh, who are running textile factories, in charge of quality control in leather factories, just extremely detail oriented and sophisticated in materiality and process. Mm-hmm. But you move to the U.S. in this neighborhood, and the best job option is to be shuttled off to a fruit and vegetable factory in the next town. In the middle of the night. There's just it's kind of fucked up. So that's the sort of, I don't know, the circumstances of it.
Yeah, but I love that you moved in and you started creating jobs and creating more community and more opportunity for these people to, learn a new craft, but also be creative. That's awesome.
It sounds like you didn't even really try to create jobs. You just got annoyed with them.
I didn't try to do anything. I didn't this was not a mission. This was not I'm going to do good in the community. No, this was totally self-serving and mutually beneficial. My only credit is I saw the value in it after it started happening, and that this is a cool way to live. This is work and life to me were always connected. I never saw a separation, and doing it this way, this was a cool, better way to do it. For, spiritual, health, be surrounded by amazing, cool people who will do this with you. Seemed sustainable,
Right.
And that grew, so the Bengali ladies, they're a crew of 7 strong, and they're so legit. They open up the shop 9 a.m., they leave at 5, and they just kill it. and they care about it, and they get it now, and and it makes for a totally motley crew, Detroit scene.
But it does sound like the healthiest codependence I can imagine.
Yeah, it is. I can accept these terms. I'm totally, I'm all in on it. And it's not all nice and easy. It's working with 7 of your aunties who give you a hard time all the time. It's why are you still single? And
oh my God.
They bust your, what? It's not there's a lot of, I don't know. Yeah. It's working with family. It gives you a hard time. It's not always easy.
No, it's not easy, but it's family. And that means it's underscored by love, and love is the tent pole of well-being. So there you go.
Yeah. I can get down with that.
right. That was very revealing. And speaking of revealing yourself, I'm wondering if you can share with us, like, I don't know, something you might consider to be a secret, like something, a ridiculous hope, or I mean, you already sort of exposed a fear of doing origami in a hotel room somewhere, but maybe there's something, a quirky interest or an ambition that you've never really talked about. We don't have to go in depth because it's maybe unformed, but just give us a little something.
God, that's so hard. I'm so private, and like this whole like thing of working in the studio with 10 people, seeing like your good and bad side is like it's been such a learning curve for me, like emotionally. There's something to reveal is something that I would be a fear maybe to reveal is that like before this, if I ever failed, I only felt like I was failing myself, and I'm very, like, inherently a pretty destructive person, like, for whatever reason. Like, there's always like been a trail of sort of gunpowder sort of behind me, sort of thing, you know. And so like that's kind of a constant fear of like self-destructing. But if I'm solo, it's like only I blow up.
Right.
Being around people that I care about and want to be able to, you know, create a sustainable situation. If I fail now, I feel like I'm failing at everyone, and that's like, that terrifies me. That's not the answer to your question, but
no, thank you for being so honest, and I totally get it. You know, from this perspective, or maybe from zooming out and getting the aerial view, it's probably why the universe has put you together with these people to keep you from self-destructing.
Ooh, going deep, Amy.
Yeah, no, I mean, like,
I felt it.
No, I mean, like, if that's the plan, yeah, I mean, like, then I feel protected and lucky. Yeah.
But you also get to get up close and personal with your own sense of accountability and responsibility. And I don't mean that in terms of just not self-destructing. I mean, like, in terms of witnessing how much love and impact you have yet to put out in the world, and how much love and impact you can have on a daily basis.
Yeah.
Maybe. I don't, maybe.
Right. No, you're right. No, you're totally, you just got me. You got me. I'm just like, I got nothing. You're just, yeah. I don't know. I feel it. I don't have anything to say. You're right.
Well, let's look to the future. Is there some fun adventure or something that's, I don't know, that you keep as a carrot dangling in front of you that you might do one day that makes you excited about the future?
I mean, there's a couple things. Like, there's, so like we're at this point, you know, with the work that we did our first and only solo show with like Friedman Benda, which is just our dream gallery, you know, but it was like the culmination of like this body of work that we'd been building, you know, up to this point, you know, and it's like, and I think we did it, you know, I think we fucking nailed it, but it's like, but as an artist, you know, the thing is like, okay, but now what? Right. So it's like we can't, of course, like we have more ideas within that body of work, and we're going to evolve branches of it, you know, and mature it in new ways. But it's like, what the fuck are we going to do now? Like, that's the most terrifying and exciting thing about that, like, for me, like, to be an artist, you know, like, how can we, like, what are we going to do? And we have these like scrappy models and tests and new processes we want to develop, but now we have more experience, and that we're looking at it, we're sort of flipping the narrative in the sense that we have narratives and ideas that we want to explore, and so going into materials and processes with a clear vision of what we want to talk about sort of starts to mold and define the forms and the process moving forward, which is a very different way of working for me that it's sort of hard to define, and the results are completely unknown. But that's like a really good place to be.
That exploratory phase. Yeah. Because you know why? Yeah. Because you tinker around in there until you find the next dragon to chase.
That's right. You need a new drug. You just you need a new drug, and it's gonna like it's gonna be so good. And like I'll do whatever it takes. I will do whatever it takes to get there. Like literally, there's nothing more important.
Well, do you have like a big picture or a bigger vision for your work in your studio? Like, what's the main goal?
Main goal is like, I don't know, because I'm really, really happy with what we've achieved. If the high school Chris that we talked about, that Booker T. Washington saw what we've created now, he wouldn't fucking believe. Like, there's no way. Like, he would have been like, you weren't supposed to live that long. The way you do things. So it's achieving what we have today. I think it's important to like stop and be really, really appreciative. That being said, moving forward is about building a stronger, more sustainable like studio, like where we want more and more authorship over what we're doing. I mean, we have total authorship, but in the sense that being able to explore the work like boundlessly, being allowed to sail, and being able to make work that expresses the world that we live in right now is the goal. Like, that's like, you want to feel relevant, man. I mean, like that, like I do, like, I want to feel like I know a little bit about who I am and the time I'm living in. And I do that through like making artifacts, and that this is just like one little blip, in time that was like right on time. Yeah. And I don't, that's the goal.
That's a meaningful goal. I like that.
Well, I mean, the Friedman Benda show is something that we definitely would recommend that our listeners take a look at. But is there anything else going on that you'd like to share with them? A new project coming up or something to look out for?
In winter, various group shows, museum stuff, and then commission stuff that's like all private stuff, so you can't talk about it anyway. I don't know. We're working on like some new crazy stuff that I hope people like. Well, the thing is, like, people like it or hate it. Yeah. There's not a lot of people in the middle of the road for what we do. They're like, it's okay. They're like, it's great. It's horrible. So expect more. It's fantastic, or it's the worst thing I've ever seen.
Well, you're doing something right if there are people who absolutely love it and absolutely hate it.
Yeah.
All right. Well, where can our listeners keep track of you? Like your website and social media handles?
All right, my website sucks. It's like a splash page.
GeoCities?
It's like chrisschanck.com. It has like one image. It doesn't load properly. It's super professional. So like Instagram, that's the way to go. Chris Schanck, one word, SCHANCK, and then artsy, and then like Friedman Benda's. Like that's where most of the content is.
Okay, we got it.
Great. We'll put links to that stuff in our show notes for this episode too.
It has been awesome talking to you. Your perspective is really, I don't know. I feel like your sincerity and your thoughtfulness and the way that you think about your work and the way you approach things, you articulated it in a way that I feel was really, really interesting. And well, I love you a little bit, Chris. I feel close to you now.
I love you too. Yeah, it's not, I don't, like, if we were probably sitting across from each other, I don't know if I could have opened up the same way. I think it's because we're, the mystery of the phone. I'm sitting in, like, a dim hotel room in New York, and, what else are you going to do but open up your soul to strangers across the country?
That means when you meet us in person, you'll feel we're already connected on such a deep level.
I can't wait.
Well, thanks so much for this. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. I enjoyed it.
Bye. He's very down to earth and approachable, and I really appreciate that about an artist, especially someone who has a gallery show, like a solo show at such a large gallery, like a well-respected gallery. Mm-hmm. I just felt like he was like a normal person, which is so nice.
A normal, but you can tell he's sensitive too, and that, you know, he hinted at a few things, like he moved around 22 times between Pittsburgh and school. He's got a self-destructive streak.
Yeah, I agree with you, but I think a lot of creative people have to be overly emotional or have something in their lives that really drives that creativity. And sometimes it comes from a dark place, or sometimes it comes from moving around 22 times, or, you know, having a lot of like codependent relationships, or maybe your artistic side causes you to have those things. I don't know. There's a relationship there.
Like, I think because you're so deeply sensitive, you can access all of these feelings, but it's also causes you to get into situations where then you have these feelings that you have to work through.
To process. Yeah, totally.
I do think in a grand sort of universal program, he found that extended family in his studio as a way of keeping himself from self-destructing.
Yeah, I think that well, first of all, he definitely had a lot of mentors along the way. So I think that was huge for him. I mean, it started with his uncle, right?
Rocco! Uncle Rocco.
And then throughout, he talked about, he named teachers by name from high school, and then again and then in college, and all along the way. So it sounds like maybe whenever he was ready to veer off of a path, there was someone that intervened in his life. And maybe that was like the universe telling him, like, this is the route you need to take, right? And then, maybe it's come full circle. Maybe he has created the family to not only fill the need that maybe he might have had when he was younger, but also protect him from himself.
Yeah.
Sometimes we just need somebody to do that for us.
His work is really exciting. It's almost indescribable, and I don't want to put words around it that don't do it justice. So I'm just going to encourage all of our listeners to go check it out, because it is the kind of thing that invites you in and pushes you away at the same time. And I find that very provocative and infinitely intriguing, you know?
Yes, I totally agree. And I also agree when he said that it can be off-putting for people, or maybe they just immediately love it. So there's a visceral reaction, I think, to his work. But I think that's when you know you've got something good. Like, if nobody hates it and nobody loves it, like, what do you have? Be of beige.
Right.
You know?
Right.
There's no passion.
The people who hate it either hate it because they don't understand the depth, or they hate it because it repulses them in a very real way, which is equally as provocative as the people who love it.
But could also be the goal.
Well, yeah, no, I'm saying that's a valid and valuable reaction to have.
Yes.
But no one can say that he's a hack or that he's just, putting stuff out there kind of in a slapdash, non-meaningful way.
No, and he talked about his studio and the collaboration that happens there and the sense of family and kind of working through these things together. And also, it sounded like he respected the ideas of the people that work with him too.
Yeah, or they made him respect.
Right.
I love that it starts with Uncle Rocco and ends with like 7 aunties like giving shit all the time.
That's great.
Thanks for listening, everyone. Please go to cleverpodcast.com to sign up for our newsletter, read the show notes, and see images of Chris's work. You can subscribe to Clever on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, SoundCloud, YouTube, or pretty much wherever there is hot podcast action. And please subscribe, rate, and review, because that really, really helps us get discovered by new listeners and be able to share these amazing stories with more people.
I'm cracking up over hot podcast action. That's a good one. Okay, you can also connect with us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at Clever Podcast. Tell us what you think. Share your stories. Share what your favorite part of this episode was. Just let us know what you think. Clever is produced by 2VDE Media, and this episode was edited by Ty Navarez and Alex Perez with music by L1011.